Hi guys, this is vf.miniatures Warhammer Tactics series, and today I'd like to discuss the Salamanders. These are the most compassionate kind out of all the Space Marine chapters, but what can they offer us in terms of competitive play? Let's talk about this in the video. As we've already established in the previous How to Play episodes, is that in order to play an army well, you need to understand it. And I mean a deep and thorough understanding of what the army is capable of and what are the things that you should probably avoid doing with it. That's why we'll start with the strength. They are, of course, Space Marines, so they have access to all the good stuff from the main Space Marine Codex, the models, the Secondaries, the stratagems, relics, and etc. And our goal should be maximizing the strength of the Salamanders using their special rules, relying on the backbone of the main Space Marine Codex. What I like about Salamanders is that they probably are one of the most middle-of-the-road chapters out there. So they are like Ultramarines, can do a little bit of everything fairly well. But unlike the 13th Legion cousins, I think that they do have a speciality, even though it's a very narrow one, and I'm talking about the flame and melter weapons, of course. Their so-called super doctrine kicks in when you are in tactical doctrine, so from the second turn onwards, and it allows you to have +1 to wound on your flame and melter weapons. And it's an excellent buff because your melters will be wounding anything that's toughness 7 or lower on 2s and toughness 8 stuff like knights on 3s. And anything that can help us get those wounds through on the key targets is very welcome. And for flamers, of course, it's maybe even more important because those are usually strength 4 or 5, so it's relatively hard for them to wound anything, even toughness 4 stuff. So having +1 to wound on all your flamers can be an excellent way to get rid of hordes, some light targets, and even sometimes elite units if you have the right tools at your disposal, like a lot of shots and some AP. But let's go back to their chapter tactic. Their chapter tactic is, again, a very universal one, as you may have guessed. It has two parts. First one is defensive buff. All your army ignores AP1. Surely it's not that powerful like ignoring AP1 and 2, but these abilities are usually dedicated to a very specific unit and they are not army-wide. So for chapter tactic, it's a very powerful buff and it can save your units in some very tight situations sometimes. And the offensive part is the single reroll to wound. It used to be a reroll to hit and reroll to wound, but they are getting rid of those abilities because they are honestly too powerful to have army-wide. So again, we have something to help us wound the targets. It's especially great considering that we have this buff for the melter weapons in the tactical doctrine. So we are not only gonna be wounding stuff on 2s, on 3s, we will also have an ability to reroll a single dice for all of our units. And obviously this buff is especially important for units that are small and numerous, so MSU units with heavy weapons are the best benefactors for this buff. Ever since the Salamander supplement came out back in the 8th edition, I was a fan of the Promethean Discipline because it had a few psychic powers that I adored, and I was always a fan of Salamanders, so I really liked that they got their own psychic discipline and that this psychic discipline has buffs like that. And we'll talk about those buffs in particular later in this video. Salamanders can build probably the toughest characters of all the Space Marine chapters out there, because they have some incredible warlord traits, one in particular, and they have a great selection of relics, and even their stratagems are, some of them are geared towards survivability of your characters. They have, for example, a stratagem to resurrect a slain character on a 4+, which is not something that most Space Marine chapters have. I think it's the only chapter that has a resurrection strat for characters. To add to the pile of things I adore about Salamanders is their list of stratagems. It's one of the most versatile and diverse lists of stratagems out of all the Space Marine chapters that I have seen. They have a stratagem for almost any situation. And we'll obviously talk about the best of those in the later sections of this video. Now for the weaknesses. Obviously, the Salamanders have the same problem as all the other chapters that have a good psychic discipline of their own, like the Space Wolves or the Iron Hands or the Salamanders. It's that you need the Psychic Fortress to protect your shooting castle, whatever you want to call it, with the invulnerable save. And if you want to get access to your unique psychic discipline, you need to have at least 2 librarians, because you need one for the librarian's discipline with the psychic fortress, and the other will know in this case, the Promethean discipline. And that's not great. We don't really have enough space in our detachments, and we don't have enough points usually to bring 2 librarians, and that's why we'll need to make sacrifices. And in this case, it will probably be sacrificing the invulnerable save for the Promethean discipline, and we'll talk later about mitigating that disadvantage. Next up are the Melters and Flamers. Those are great weapons, but unfortunately, even though ever since the 8th edition we've seen a lot of models come out with the flame and especially melter weapons, like Eradicators, like the melters on the repulsors and impulsors. However, a fun fact is that the Black Templars can have a multi-melter on their repulsor and their impulsor, but Salamanders and other chapters, they don't have this ability yet, which is a funny thing considering what relationship the Salamanders have with the melter weapons. So even though the quantity of those units was increasing and still is increasing ever since the 8th edition, these units are still pretty rare. So it's not like your whole army will benefit from the +1 to wound for the melt and flame. Unfortunately, it probably will be only a couple of units that will actually benefit from that, and it's up to us to get the most out of it. And another disadvantage that the flame and melt weapons have is that they are mostly short range. So the flamers, of course, obviously they are even shorter. They are only 12 inches usually, so it's extremely short range weapons. And the melters are most likely 12 or 24 inches in case of a multi-melter, so not that much. It's probably better to stick those weapons on the units that have a good move characteristic, like, say, Invader ATVs. Salamanders are relatively slow, so they don't have any special unique units like the Space Wolves have, for example, the Thunderwolf Cavalry. They don't have any stratagems that would allow them to advance and charge, or any warlord traits that would allow that. So they are as fast or as slow as a typical standard Space Marines chapter. They don't have any extra ways to generate command points apart from the good old Master of the Codex Warlord trait, and if you've seen my video 5 things to avoid in the Space Marines Codex, you know what I feel about this Warlord trait. And the last thing is that they have that old problem of fitting enough elite and HQ units into their detachments, so they don't have any force organization benefits, no special troops that would make it easier to build a battalion, for example. So we have all the same problems that the other Space Marine chapters may have. Now let's talk about the army composition. We usually try to build a balanced list. It's what I recommend always to do when you can, and the Salamanders are probably the best chapter to build a balanced list around. We should try fitting as much melt and flame weapons into the list, and the main emphasis should be on the melter weapons, because there are a lot of ways ultimately to kill the chaff, the small or horde units, usually if you are building a balanced list, and not that many ways to kill the big and scary stuff. As usual, the backbone of our list should be the Dreadnought Fire platform. It's still the best way to run Space Marines in my opinion, and that's where we will try to mitigate the lack of the Psychic Fortress by taking 3 regular Contemptor Dreadnoughts with multi-melters. And these serve 2 purposes. First of all, they have the melter weapons, so we will be benefiting from the Super Doctrine, and they have the inbuilt 5+ invulnerable save, so we don't have to think about that, and we won't miss the Psychic Fortress. Of course, the Contemptors are worse than Redemptors in my opinion. They have 4 wounds less, their guns have a shorter range, only 24 inches, unlike the plasmas on the Redemptors that are 36. The Redemptor plasma has D6 shots instead of 2 on the multi-melta, and the Redemptors are much deadlier in combat. But at least the Contemptors have their own invulnerable save and they have Meltas to benefit from the Super Doctrine. Then we should, I think, add a very big and tough unit to benefit from those psychic powers that the Salamanders have access to, and those probably should be the Terminators with the Thunderhammers and Storm Shields. You can substitute those with Blade Guard or Centurions, but I don't recommend it because the Blade Guard and Centurions can only have a unit size of up to 6, and this unit probably should be a 10-man blob. They will be advancing towards the enemy, holding the center of the board, charging for you when the time comes, heroically intervening for 2 command points with a special stratagem, heroically intervening 2d6 inches. You would also be able to fire Overwatch, but these are the Terminators with shields, so they have no guns, but the 2d6 heroic intervention is a nice thing to have in your back pocket. As for the speed and support in melee shooting, as I always say, we should have something to go for a fire objective or to kick some lightweight unit off an enemy's objective, some objective that is poorly defended, I mean. For that role, I think there's no better unit than the good old Vanguard Vets with Lightning Claws and Storm Shields, and the Invader ATV would be a great support fire platform for the army. ATVs are fast, they are relatively durable, especially with ignoring AP-1, which may help in some situations. They are relatively cheap, their cost per wound is very low for that kind of a unit with toughness 5, and they have a Primaris keyword, so they can use Transhuman if you really need it. And they have some light anti-infantry firepower if you are up against a Horde army, for example, with their auto bolt rifles. And I would also advise to have a single sort of tactical nuclear warhead unit. It's a one-use only fire support that you move out from the, for example, strategic reserves. They annihilate something very important, something very, very expensive, and get killed in the next turn because they are too much of a threat, but it doesn't matter because they've already done their job. And the 2 of the best choices for that, I think, are the Eradicators that you should put into strategic reserves for 2 command points, and the Devastators in a drop pod. And of course, you must arm those Devastators with the multi-meltas. In a Salamanders list, multi-meltas on the Devastators is the law. The bare minimum for the HQ support, I think, would be the Chief Librarian with a good old Psychic Mastery for the +1 to cast, and the Captain. Any captain would do, but I would recommend to have a captain with toughness 5, so Gravis or Bike, to benefit from the Warlord trait that increases your toughness by 2, so they would be toughness 7 characters. The troops are mostly a burden for the Salamanders, like for the most of the Space Marines chapters, only if you are trying to build some experimental lists. I've seen those kinds of lists on tournaments that has like 6 units of tactical squads. Each of those have a multi-melta that utilizes that single reroll per squad, but these kinds of lists, they need playtesting, and I'm not sure that they will be able to stand up to the competitive lists that you would most likely encounter on any tournament. So my best recommendation would be to minimize the amount of troops you have. And the best way to do that, I think, is by using the Vanguard detachment. So you won't need any troops if you don't want to take them. You have those very much needed 6 slots for the elites, 2 slots for the HQ, and 2 slots for the fast attack and heavy support, which is more than enough. Salamanders have 3 special characters. First of them is Vulkan Histan. He's a named captain. He is a typical firstborn captain, the only difference being his 3+ invulnerable save and 2-up armor save in terms of defense. He has a strength 6 AP 2 and damage D3 spear that is strength 8 if he's your warlord and has the warlord trait Anvil of Strength. But of course, that's not why we would want to take a special character. We are interested in the buffs, and the Vulkan, his stand gives a very nice buff. He can select a unit within 6 of him in your command phase, and that core or character unit can reroll hits and wounds for the melt and flame weapons until the start of your next command phase. It's a great buff, especially if you can apply it to, say, a big unit of aggressors with flamers, or even more importantly, units of eradicators, because flamers can obviously not benefit from the reroll to hit because they auto hit. But the worst thing I think about this ability, unfortunately, is that it's applied in the command phase. So if you are using your fire base as I recommended previously, so you put your eradicators into dip strike so they can't be shot at in the first turn, and you will get the drop on your opponent, so you will be able to shoot them first before they can be targeted, then you won't be able to apply this buff because they won't be on the table in your command phase, which is a pity. Next up is my favorite captain, my favorite Primaris special character of all of them, Adrax Agatone. He's a monster of a captain. He's basically good at everything. He's a beast in combat. He has 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 3 and damage 4. It's a typical Thunderhammer, so he suffers a -1 to hit, but who cares? It's a damage 4 Thunderhammer. He has 6 wounds and the 4-up and 1 like a typical Primaris captain, but he also has 2-up armor save, and he reduces all the damage by 1 like a Dreadnought, so he's very survivable. And in a pinch, if he's in trouble, you can always use the good old transhuman on him because he is Primaris. But the most important thing about him is that he has a 6-inch aura of +1 to wound in melee on the charge and heroic intervention for core units. So your Salamanders within 6 inches of this guy become a little bit of the Blood Angels themselves. And you get all that great stuff for just 145 points. Of course, as far as the captains go, it's not the cheapest. He's probably the most expensive character out there, but he's definitely 100% worth it. And the third special character is the Brayarth Ashmantle. It's the Forge World character dreadnought that the Salamanders can take for their HQs. He has 2-up save, 5-up and 1, 5-up shrug, 7 attacks at strength 16, AP 4 and damage 4, and 2d6 flamer shots at strength 6, AP 2 and damage 2. If you think that it's a crazy profile, and if you think that this is a crazy profile, you just don't know what this dreadnought was back in 8th edition, in the good old times when the Forge World could write the rules just the way they wanted to. This dreadnought had toughness 9, the flamers were damage 3, this dreadnought had a 4-up shrug as well as the 5-up and 1, and its cost was something like 400 points. So it was a crazy thing, and I'm happy that it was changed. And now he costs 220 points, which is much more reasonable. He is a beast in combat, but unfortunately he does not give any buffs for the army, so I'm not sure that you would want to spend those 220 points on him. It depends on what you want your list to do, but him being a character dreadnought really helps because you can hide him behind your units and send him out only when you really need to. As for the secondaries, the Salamanders don't have any of their own special secondaries at the moment, and we are stuck with the regular secondaries and the secondaries from this main Space Marine Codex. I will just skip the Codex Warfare because it's the worst secondary that you can probably imagine taking in the Purge the Enemy category. The Shock Tactics is also not that great, controlling one or more objective markers that you were controlled by your opponent at the start of the battle round. It's not that hard, but I would probably go for Stranglehold if you were choosing from the Battlefield Supremacy category, or the good old Engage on all fronts is also a better choice in my opinion. And last but not least is the good old Oath of Moment, which is a nice secondary, especially if your list wasn't designed to use the last secondary. So your most expensive units maybe are not that tough and are relatively easy to kill. Now for my favorite section, the Synergies. First of all, I really recommend to take Adrax Agatone. He is almost an auto-include for the price that they are asking for him. You need a captain in your force, and what better captain than the one that is very survivable, can smack someone on the head with a damage 4 Thunderhammer and provides a wonderful buff in melee. When he gets into combat, I recommend to use the wonderful 1 command point Crucible of Battle stratagem for him for a flat out +1 to wound in combat. You can also use the stratagem in shooting for any Salamander core or character unit. It's probably the best stratagem in the whole book, and you will be using it a lot in your games. If Adrax gets slain, you can always use the Rise from the Ashes 2 command point stratagem to try and resurrect him on the 4+, or you can simply fight on death with a good old Only in Death Does Duty End for also 2 command points. Your librarian should be kitted out with either the Tome of Vulkan, the +1 to cast and an extra power from the Promethean Discipline, or the Obsidian Aquila relic that provides a 6+ shrug for all core units within 6 of the character, so your Dreadnoughts and your Terminators. It's extremely important to have the 6+ shrug for your Terminators, so the 3 damage weapons won't be as effective against them. They won't be killing a Terminator each time you suffer a wound and it passes through your invulnerable save, and is also very important for the Contemptors because it will make them more survivable, closer to the level of survivability of a Redemptor with its 13 wounds compared to the 9 wounds of a Contemptor. As for the psychic powers, there are absolutely 2 auto takes. The first one is a Drake skin. It's a +1 toughness for any unit. It's not like Might of Heroes that affects a single model. It's applied to an entire unit. So you can apply it to, say, a unit of 10 Terminators and you will have toughness 5 Terminators, which is incredible, especially considering that they can't use the transhuman stratagem. And the second power is the Fire Shield. It's a -1 to hit against ranged attacks and -1 to charge them. So 2 very, very powerful buffs. Of course, the -1 to hit is the most important out of 2 of them, but having a -1 to charge may also prove to be valuable. Probably the best buff in Warlord trait in the Salamanders book is the Never Give Up Warlord trait that allows you to give an OPSEC to a selected unit in your command phase. It can be a character or core unit, so in this case it probably will be the 10-man unit of Terminators, so that they are more effective at taking and holding those objectives. Your 2 best friends when your Terminators and Blade Guard eventually get into combat will be the already mentioned Crucible Battle for +1 to wound, especially for the units that are far away from Adrax, because he already provides the +1 to wound. And the second stratagem is the Strength of the Primarch. I really like that one because it's a +1 to strength of your weapons, so your claws will be strength 5, which is very important to wound the toughness 4 and toughness 5 targets better. And the Thunderhammers will be strength 9, so you will be wounding the Knights or Plaguebear Scrollers on 3s, and with the help of Adrax or the Crucible Battle, it can be on 2s. And what's even more shocking is that on a non-modified wound roll of 6+, your damage is doubled. So your claws are damage 2 and your Thunderhammers are damage 6. And all that you get for just 1 command point. It's what I like about the Salamanders. Their stratagems are very, very cheap. As I already mentioned, your fire support, your non-dreadnought fire support should stay in reserves or deep strike until turn 2, so they can't be targeted by your opponent and they can benefit once they arrive from the Super Doctrine with their multi-meltas. When they arrive, I recommend to use the 1 command point Relentless Determination stratagem on them to ignore the penalty for moving and shooting the heavy weapons, and this stratagem also is a great thing because you can use the Eradicators with the heavy melter rifles, which are, in my opinion, much better than the regular melter rifles because of that sweet damage d6+2 or d6+4 in melter range. If you so wish, you can also build a Fortress of a Chaplain by using the Forge Master Warlord trait for the Toughness 7 and Miraculous Constitution Warlord trait for the 6-up Shrug and healing 1 wound per battle round. I would also give him the Salamander's Mantle Relic for the -1 to wound, so that all the attacks that are strength 6 and lower would wound him on 6s only, which is incredible. And even attacks that are strength 8 and higher will wound him only on 4s. So it's like a gigantic transhuman physiology. You can actually get him up to toughness 8 with a psychic power, but I don't think that it's necessary, and you are far better off using that on your big unit of Terminators. I'm not sure that you really need this guy in this list, but Salamanders are not like Space Wolves or White Scars or Black Templars. They're not all about the fast lightning assault, and Chaplain is not a mandatory character in this list. But if you use this model tactically and position him wisely, he can be a nuisance and a pain for your opponent, and he will probably make his value back in points that he either protects or kills himself. By using him tactically, I mean using him as a tank or a bait. For example, a typical instinct of any player, especially on a tournament, would be to get rid of your characters as soon as possible, and if you leave a gap for someone to charge into your chaplain, that may be a very nice trap for them, because they would think that they can kill this chaplain, where in reality they probably will not, and you will just endure whatever comes your chaplain's way and then strike back at them. But be very cautious with that, because your chaplain is definitely not immortal. I would also recommend to have at least 2 or 3 d6 flamer shots in your army in order to utilize the wonderful 1 command point stratagem that's called Fires of Battle, and you basically make your opponent suffer 1 mortal wound for each 4+ to wound that you roll, to a maximum of 3 mortal wounds per use of this stratagem. It's a very nice way to push those wounds through, especially with very tough units like, say, Blight Lord Terminators or Deathwing Terminators. Again, let's quickly run through the relics that the Salamanders have for us. First is the Vulkan's Sigil. It's a permanent +1 attack on the character that carries this relic, and once per game you can use it to get an aura of +1 attack for your core and character units. It's a nice buff to have to apply extra pressure in the key moments of the battle. I'm pretty sure that this is not an essential relic for your army, but if you have a spare command point and a character to put this relic on, especially a character that can fight himself, it may be a nice addition for your list. Adrax Smiter is a relic Thunderhammer with AP4, and it doubles damage on an unmodified wound roll of 6+, so like having an auto Strength of Primarch turned on. It's a great relic, especially considering that the Thunderhammers are now only AP2. As with most of other weapon upgrades, this relic is absolutely a non-essential one, so it's up to you if you want to include it in your list or not. Next is the already discussed Tome of Vulkan. It's a flat-out +1 to cast for all your Promethean powers, and your Psyker will know an extra spell from this discipline. It's a great substitute or addition to the Psychic Mastery. If you have both this relic and the Psychic Mastery, your powers, your Fire Shield and Drake Skin will go off on 4s, which is very, very easy to cast. And you need to cast those powers reliably. I think that this relic is an essential one. The Salamander's Mantle, we've already discussed it with the Chaplain. It's a permanent -1 to wound for your characters. For toughness 5 or higher characters, it's the best defensive buff that you can find in this supplement, and I'm pretty sure that in the Codex Space Marine there's nothing better than this. Even Armor Indomitus, I think, is worse, especially for the characters that already have an invulnerable save. The Obsidian Aquila, it's an aura of 6+, Feel No Pain for your core units. I think it needs no explanation. Having Feel No Pain on your Dreadnoughts and your Terminators, especially if you don't have an Apothecary in your list, it's extremely important. An essential relic Absolutely. And the Promethean Plate, it's a great defensive buff for toughness 4 characters that can't turn on the transhuman with the stratagem. The Salamander's Mantle is obviously better for the toughness 5 characters, but if you have some on toughness 4 and you really need to buff them and protect them, the Promethean Plate is your choice. Now let's quickly run through a roster example that I've put together myself. It's a typical Vanguard detachment. First of all is Adrax Agatone. We've already discussed it's an absolute must-take for any Salamanders list. Next is the Primaris Librarian with all the necessary buffs. Next are the 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts with multi-melters, bolters, and Dreadnought combat weapons, obviously. A 9-man Terminator squad with 7 shields and hammers and 2 lightning claws. Next is the 5-man Vanguard squad. We've already discussed why we need the Vanguards with jump packs. We need the speed in our list, at least some speed to attack some faraway objective or to distract your opponent and make some choices harder for them. 2 units of 2 Invader ATVs to use the Salamanders reroll more efficiently, and 2 units of 4 Devastators with Sergeants and Armorium Cherubs with multi-melters, and both of those units go into a drop pod. And all this sums up to 1,997 points. Believe me, my OCD was killing me, but there is nothing in the Space Marine Codex that you can add to this list for 3 points, so I had to leave it this way. So that's it, guys. That's all I wanted to say about playing the Salamanders competitively. I hope this video was useful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.